Hey family, it's Shaq, and I hope you're doing really well wherever you are. If you follow me on Twitter or watch me on Twitch or even just hang out in our Discord, you probably know what I've been up to for the entirety of patch 317 in Arch Nemesis League. If not, you're probably wondering why I haven't uploaded a video in 3 months. Well, that's a fair question. It's because I've been working on this. This is a project that I've been calling Class Builds for Everyone, and today I want to show you where we are. Now, I believe I briefly mentioned something about this in my last video, but again, that was about 3 months ago. So today, I want this to serve as kind of the intro to the series as a whole, and I want to show you the current progress, what I've been working so hard on, to the point where I'm pretty sure I haven't had a haircut or shaved in about that time. And I want to show you where we're at, as well as the future plans for the project. Path of Exile is a complicated and intimidating game, I know. By design, and as kind of a general feature of the ARPG genre, PoE is notoriously difficult to learn and really hard to appreciate, especially as a new player. For about the last 3 years, my Cold Dot Guide has helped hundreds of thousands of players get into the game or just push deeper into the endgame than they ever have before. And about 6 months ago, I started asking myself, what about people who don't want to play a witch? What about people who don't want to play cold damage over time? I totally get it. There's a lot of people like that. What about players who want to deal fire damage or physical? What about people who want to play Marauder? I know they exist. I don't know where they are, but they're out there. I decided it was time to go beyond the Cold Dot Guide and sort of take its core concepts and expand it to cover and sort of help a much wider range of players. I started laying the groundwork for the project during Scourge League, kind of doing some planning and discussing my ideas with my Discord mods and some other content creators and knowledgeable players. In Arch Nemesis League, the project got underway in full, and it's pretty much been my sole focus for the last 3 months. Well, the project is far from complete, and I cannot stress that enough. I've reached the first major milestone, and I really want to show you both the scope of the project and where we are at the moment. The first step was to identify my overall goal. I wanted to be sure that any new player had a guide they could use no matter what their preferred playstyle. In the end, this meant that I'd be creating 7 guides in total. These 7 guides would cover the 7 classes in Path of Exile, but that's not all. To truly help as many players as possible, those 7 guides would need to include all 5 damage types: fire, cold, lightning, physical, and chaos damage, and I wanted to cover as many archetypes as possible. This meant at a baseline having at least 1 spellcaster, 1 ranged bow user, and 1 melee character. And I just want to say a quick thank you to my kids for doing the animations used in that time lapse.
You're welcome!
They're everywhere. Now, with this initial criteria set, I was still only about halfway to being able to work on the individual builds. As a matter of fact, deciding on the actual builds was so challenging and so time-consuming, I was theory crafting and testing builds as recently as Zizrin's Gauntlet and even a few days after. I had some strict criteria for the builds. They need to be new player friendly, or at least sort of uncomplicated mechanically. They needed to be league starters, solo self-found viable, and I wanted them to rely on strong game mechanics as much as possible, as opposed to specific interactions between unique items that may be expensive in Trade League or hard to obtain in solo self-found. Now, one thing I do want to point out really quick related to gameplay footage is that, honestly, I don't have time right now to grab them. I'm trying to get these as leagues start ready as possible by Friday. I have been showing the kind of leveling up and then the kind of early end game or even late game kind of a gameplay preview on my stream a lot. These have all been tested. These have all been played in the end game. They all work really well. So there will be gameplay video of them out as soon as I can do that. But right now there's not going to be any in the video. It's more just to cover where the PoBs are at and the leveling process to get you going in your league start. So I apologize for that, but it'll be basically recorded as soon as I'm able to. So to kickstart the project, I began with a complete restructuring of my Cold Dot Guide. The goal was for the forum guide to have all of the basic information, with the idea being if you read through it, you would understand the core concepts of the build, and you could then take the path of building, which has much more advanced notes in the notes section, and not have to return to the forum guide after, playing exclusively from the path of building. So with the scope of the project sort of defined and the ideas behind it being explained, let's start by taking a look at Colt.dot. I want to start by noting a couple of quick things, mainly the idea that this now serves as a template for the other guides. The layout of the Colt.dot guide was completely redone to try to work in a very structured and orderly manner and to cut down on the amount of information that's in the forum guide itself. Again, I wanted to move the basic information all to the forum guide and take the advanced info that's in the forum guide and move it into the notes section of the POB. At the end of this process, I saved the layout of the forum guide to use as a template for the other 6 builds, and you can kind of get a quick preview of that right here. Now, I know this is a little bit of a behind the curtain sort of view, and we're not going to do this for everything, but I just wanted to note that I've saved the layout, the formatting, everything, so that I can go through and just replace all of the Colt.dot specific references and replace it with information for the other builds. So in terms of the forum guides now, what you'll find is there's going to be a table of contents, there's a little brief introduction, and then you'll have your build overview, which will introduce the mechanics and how kind of each build works, some of the most important things to know about things like scaling your damage and defense, how different skill gems work if there's something special to note, and things like that. You have a leveling section, which will give you some general advice. Again, more leveling info is in the POB that's sort of more advanced. And then you'll have an endgame section, which again, will just cover things like the ascendancy points, the basics of your endgame items, and kind of point you to the fact that some of the more advanced information on this is in the POB itself. Now, before we go to any of the other tabs in the POB, I want to note 2 things really quickly. First of all, yes, I know that the Colt.dot tree looks like a bicycle. I can't unsee it, and I want to make sure that you can't either. But more importantly, I've really taken a hard look at how the POBs are done, because I think that the typical way of setting up a POB, even for a new player, really doesn't do them any favors. There are a lot of things, and I'm specifically noting this left side panel. There are many things within the panel itself that just are borderline incomprehensible if you're brand new. And I'm trying to take that into consideration as much as possible. So with that being said, let's look at what I mean by that. In the skills sections of all the builds, you're going to find the solo self-found links and the trade links. There are a few builds that have just a ton of overlap, and in that case, there may be a section, I think the Toxic Rain Guide is an example we'll see in a second, where most of the gems are just listed in a shared links section with just a couple of solo self-found link changes and trade link changes. But for the most part, they're laid out very cleanly so that you can see whether you're in solo self-found or in trade, what gems you're going to need to use. Anytime there's changes to these POBs, you'll see at the top there's a change log that you can kind of take note of. The information in here will be filled out as the other guides are complete, which we'll talk about in just a second. In a couple of places where I think there's extremely important notes that sometimes are kind of overlooked, namely at the beginning of the opening notes, as well as some information on going for the trade version. I've tried to highlight the most important things in yellow. And there are a couple places you'll see for some of the builds where in the leveling notes specifically, there's some big yellow chunks of information that are really important, but we'll get to those later. The most important thing to note is this set of notes right here. Moving forward, this whole left side panel that you will see in the POB is going to have warnings and things that do not look correct. There's a reason for this. The reason is it's not helpful for new players. It's really hard to communicate well the idea that items in POBs are fake. We create them. I can make whatever I want. I can make a perfect item with 6 perfect tier 1 attributes, resists, life, damage, everything. They're made up. And it's really easy to kind of overinflate this panel. And so I've just taken that out of the equation. And I'll show you a lot more specifically when we get to the item section. But this is how it's going to be moving forward. The one thing that I will note that I added is I just put this here so that there's not a massive warning. The one thing that seems to come across to new players really clearly is the idea of capping resistances. So I've just put a custom modifier in here because, again, you're just trying to cap your resistances on items. Whatever it takes, you get the resistances to make sure that you're capped. That's what you do. So I've no longer put them on the item specifically. So with that out of the way, I want to look at the biggest overhaul to the way that I'm doing my guides now, and that is in the items of the POB. Let's take a look. Now, in terms of layout, this is pretty much identical to how I did it before. I have 4 sets of items, which is the SSF, starter endgame, and late endgame items, as well as the trade, starter endgame, and late endgame items. The difference is in the items themselves. So let's take a quick look at the items to show kind of what I mean when I say the items are done a lot differently than you've probably ever seen before. And the reason is, again, this is meant to be as helpful as possible for new players. Very often what will happen is I will select mods on an item, and a new player will have most of those mods, or even all of the mods that I've selected, but they'll have maybe a little bit less of one attribute than I have listed, maybe a little bit more of one resist, and that genuinely causes a lot of problems. If you're brand new, you may think that this item has to have, say, 40 dexterity when you roll 38 on an item, which is really solid, and you think that the item is trash just because it didn't roll up to that kind of number. So rather than cause confusion, I'm trying to make this process a lot simpler for new players to say, hey, if you have rings, you're going to be looking for some dexterity and strength on there. I'm not giving you a hard number because you just want your attributes to be capped for what you need. So as you'll see, going through every single item with the exception of the unique items, they all are a list of the mods that you're looking for, and they're separated into 3 categories. You have required mods, which you can see, or this is a good example. So required mods for late endgame items. It would help if I didn't have my camera over top of them, so let's scroll this up a little bit. So there's a good example. So if you're gonna play this build into the late endgame for SSF, you have to roll some armor and energy shield on your shield, right? You need your defenses. The biggest idea is you need Shaper or Crusaders recover percentage of your energy shield on block modifier. There's a whole list of other good mods. That's another thing that's in every item is basically required mods, good mods. And then when you get to late endgame, I've added this category for good Eldritch Implicits and or influence mods. So as an example, because we need the Shaper or Crusader recovery mod, there's no Eldritch Implicits we're looking for on this item. For a lot of items, you can have either or. You can have Shaper or Crusader body armor. You could have one that's instead has Exarch and Eater mods on them. My point being, wherever there are flexible choices, I'm trying to list the available choices to cover confusion and to help new players as much as possible. The other things that I will note is on the items are... The other thing that I will note is on things like the helmet or boots or your amulet for your anointments, I've listed out some of the other good enchants so that it's not just one thing and you end up rolling over something that would also be very helpful. So you'll see a whole list with all of the Trade League helmets and then the late endgame helmet here. You'll see something similar with the boots and again with the amulet, some kind of other good enchantments, other good anoints. And this concept is going to be in all of the PoBs. And this is the first thing I want to point out. This is not done in the other PoBs yet. I've set up some of the structuring for it, but as I move past this cold dot PoB, I'll kind of explain where the other ones are at. So with that being said, I hope this is helpful for you. I'd love some feedback. The cold dot one is obviously done because that required the least work, basically. It already existed, and it was just it was very time consuming, but it was just a matter of taking the existing items, making sure I had covered all of the mods on them, and replacing the items with the mods that you're looking for, which again includes even up to cluster jewels, some of the other just added some notes here and some of the other good notables that you may be looking for. So let me know what you think of those, especially if you're a newer player. I think this is just like with the older PoB, an experienced player can just take this and kind of run with it. So I'm trying to help out new players as much as possible. So that being said, let's move on to build number 2, Toxic Rain Raider. Now, from this point forward, I want to stress again what I said near the beginning, which is that this project is still a massive, massive work in progress. The Toxic Rain guide is the most complete out of those. It's the only one, aside from Cold Dot, that currently has a forum guide. And I just want to point out that even the Toxic Rain guide is not fully complete yet. A lot of crafting that needs to be added, a lot of things, but the biggest thing for the rest of the 6 guides that cover the other 6 classes is the leveling trees are complete and the leveling information in the PoB is fully complete. When you get gems, when to swap them with other gems, and how to kind of set up yourself to get into the end game. That is what's complete for the rest of the 6 guides. And some of them have a little bit extra info in them. Most of them have at least one full skill setup. Most of them have like one endgame tree that we used as we kind of built them up and did a proof of concept. And a lot of them are in this kind of space where I've added categories for the item mods that I showed in the Cold Dot build, but they're going to be filled in as I basically can finish up the guide. So that's kind of where they're all at. The Toxic Rain, like I said, is a little bit more fully developed. If I go down to here really quick, I can show what I mean. This one has like the full 3 SSF trees, 3 trade trees. This has all of the gems listed out for both the SSF version and trade, which the other builds do not quite have yet. But this one, I still need to basically swap all these items out for the just red modded items is what I've been calling them, that give you more of a general idea of what to go for. So with that being said, the Toxic Rain guide has a forum guide, and it has a mostly complete PoB. So this one is for a Toxic Rain Raider. You can kind of see as we go through the leveling process here. Let me show the notes section. This one is very, I would say, the most tested out of the others. Just other community members, Discord members have been testing it. It works very smoothly, whether you use a sort of the short bow into grove bow into thicket bow, or if you can get a quill rain early. Either way, it works incredibly well. I've played this in 317. I played this into almost level 90, into tier 16 maps and beyond, and it plays very smoothly. So this build is a great choice if you're looking for a bow character, if you want something that's just a little bit different to Cold Dot. So I hope you enjoy this. Take a look at this. The forum guide, as with the Cold Dot guide and the others, will be linked in the description below, so go check them out. Next up, we have the Templar build, and this is one that honestly was a massive struggle to figure out. This particular build almost didn't make the cut for a reason I'll explain in just a second, but this is the old standby, a lot of people's favorite. I know similar to Cold Dot, some people really don't like this playstyle, which I completely understand, but this is Righteous Fire and Fire Trapper Inquisitor. Now, the reason that this ended up making the cut, the reason that this ended up being the Fire build and the Templar build, is that it's just so good in every aspect. It genuinely is. It clears really well now, particularly if you can gain access to the Legacy of Fury boots from the Maven. The clear goes kind of up to 10. It really cranks out some really nice clear, to the point where, for me, when I was playing this league, even in SSF, my right-click skill wasn't Fire Trap, it wasn't any, it was just straight up Shield Charge. I mean, the majority of every map is just how fast can you run through packs as they burn really quickly. And then the sort of new thing that's become popular lately, instead of Scorching Ray, is using Fire Trap, and it works incredibly well in SSF, it works incredibly well in trade. It's just a very solid build. But I do want to note the leveling process for this. This is the reason that the build almost didn't make it. For the most part, I know that especially if you are a newer player, you tend to want to level as your build, and if not as your build, as your damage type, at least as soon as possible. And I totally understand that. And because you can't really realistically, especially in League Start, it's a lot harder to get into playing Righteous Fire before Cruel Lab is done, which means for new players, that's like Act 8 out of 10 in the campaign. It's really hard to break into that, and for that reason alone, I almost didn't even consider this build. But that's for that reason. The leveling notes for this are probably the most extensive out of the 7 builds. I do want to note also, the Templar doesn't naturally get Fire Trap. Even though it's a level 12 skill gem, they don't naturally get Fire Trap until level 31. But I've listed out a couple of ways that if you're playing in SSF especially, you can get access to that early on, and that's either muling that with another character. If you have an existing character, you can just buy it from Lily Roth or from even Nessa in Act 1. There are multiple ways to get this pretty easily or pretty quickly so that you can level with Fire Trap. But if not, the main section of this leveling portion is intended to level with Wintertide Brand. And I even have a note here. Basically, if you're going to level with Fire Trap by getting it early, you just basically wouldn't take the brand nodes early on. You'd rush up here more toward the fire nodes or toward Divine Judgment. And then in Act 3, when you start adding in Armageddon Brand, that's when you would take these brand nodes. So it's essentially kind of an either or. You're basically going to either level with Fire Trap and like Holy Flame Totem into Armageddon Brand and Fire Trap, until you swap to Righteous Fire, or you're going to level with Wintertide Brand from level 12 just until 28. So basically there would be 16 levels where you're not playing kind of your fire skill, you're playing Wintertide Brand, and then when you hit 28 you'll swap into Armageddon Brand, and then 31 Fire Trap. So either way it works really well to level you up. And then again, I have a big old section here on starting to use Righteous Fire around Cruel Labs, so there's a lot of notes in here. Take a look at it. This build is so good, seriously, it is so good. Take a look at it, try it out. But that is the Templar build. It's a Righteous Fire Trapper Inquisitor. The fourth build in the series is our Duelist build, and I have to say, I was blown away, genuinely shocked at how much fun this build is. I did not think it was going to be anywhere near as good and effective and fun as it is, and this is a Shield Crush Slayer. Not Spectral Shield Throw, not Bleed, not Gladiator. Impale Shield Crush Slayer. It's freaking awesome. Let's just look at this really quick. One of the biggest things to note here is that we're not playing Resolute Technique. We are instead stacking some accuracy. Stacking is kind of a loose term because basically you just need to make sure you have more accuracy rating than you have life. And because of that, we get a massive attack bonus from Precise Technique. And as a matter of fact, we're going to be sort of rushing this, quote unquote, early on to be able to level with it very effectively. Now, I want to note for leveling that my recommended setup, if you don't mind playing Steel Skills until then, is to swap to Shield Crush in like probably about level anywhere from 30 to 40, similar to when you'd swap to the full Cold Dot build when you're leveling with like Lightning Spire Trap and all that. The reason is you get Shield Crush at right in Lion Eyes Watch. Right at the start, you get Shield Crush. So you can, if you want to, level up using it the entire way. Now, what I will say is because the damage is based on the shield, similar to how most melee builds have to constantly upgrade their weapon, you're going to have to do that, and potentially even more often with your shield. You need to have a shield with as much armor or evasion or combined armor and evasion as you possibly can. There are some weird things to note with the way that shield bases work while leveling. There are shield bases that, as the shield base requires a higher level, the defenses actually drop, and that's for various reasons. Some of them gain other stats like movement speed or spell suppression, things like that. So what I've noted down here is this leveling tree is assuming that you're going to swap in like the mid 30s. So I've noted some of the best shield bases to look out for and kind of to upgrade to, with the end goal being a Colossal Tower shield. So just note this section here for when you're going to swap over. And at that point, you're just basically looking to use a one-handed sword with the global accuracy rating implicit. There will be more information about this kind of general concept in the notes when the notes are fully finished, as well as in the forum guide. So check this out. Just take note of the leveling trees. Like I said, I believe it's by as soon as like early on in Act 2, you can be using Precise Technique. So I would just check that out. As long as you can use Precision and then possibly use Weathered Hunter early, you'll get some resist, and you'll be able to use this and get just a massive boost to your attack damage early. So check out Shield Crush Slayer. It is faster than you think it is. It clears really well. The AoE feels great. You get the AoE as your first lab node, and it is super fun. So if you're looking for a fun melee build to check out, I highly recommend checking out Impale Shield Crush Slayer. Build number 5 is a really cool one, and it's a really simple concept that is probably the end-to-end smoothest, most clear-cut leveling progression that you can have in this project, and that is a Lightning Trap Saboteur. This build is super smooth. You basically are almost never even swapping gems out as you level. You're just adding things continually and basically playing your borderline your full endgame build partway through the acts. It is really fun, and again, it is so smooth to level. Lightning Trap is really nice. You automatically get shock and ignite immunity. It's just a really smooth build to play. I believe, yeah, it is the only spellcaster of the series that is not dot based. It's actually hit and crit based. So it's worth checking out on its own. I know in general, dot-based spellcasters are very good for new players. So if you're looking to check out something a little bit different, get some kind of upfront damage, I highly recommend giving this a try. you're basically going to level Stormblast Mine, or again, whatever skill up until level 12. I know a lot of people don't like Stormblast Mine, but as soon as you get to level 12, you'll be using Lightning Trap. You'll go from Orb of Storms and added lightning into eventually in the end game something that I think has turned out really well, at least in the skill setup to reduce the amount of button presses and everything, is Arcanist Brand will trigger your Wave of Conviction for your lightning exposure. Wave of Conviction is linked with Culling Strike, so you get the cull, and it will also apply Assassin's Mark. So you get a really kind of a nice little three-pronged effectiveness out of the one Arcanist Brand button. And then in the end game, it's going to basically just be Lightning Trap and Lightning Spire Trap, and it levels so smoothly. It's really fun to play. Recommend, again, giving this a shot just like I do with all of the other builds. So as we move into this build, I would say that this one and the last two are the ones that are the least built up. They all have leveling trees. They have a full leveling progression with the 5 trees. They have the leveling notes, but this one and the last two builds that I'm going to show have the most work to do in terms of getting the end game set up, and that'll be, basically as soon as I'm able to, but just be something to be aware of. So the 6th build for the Scion is physical damage over time. In this build, we're going to be using a combination of Exsanguinate and Corrupting Fever, and it's turned out to be surprisingly smooth, very fun to play, and particularly if you kind of equip that Transcendence MTX, highly recommend checking that one out. It's really cool. But this build has been really surprising to me in how much fun it is, how smooth it is, and as far as leveling it goes, again, we have all the trees. And to level, I wanted to be able to come up with a leveling path that at least felt somewhat spell-like. A lot of people for this would level with, say, the Splitting Steel, and then basically have to sub out of that into spellcaster weapons and then start taking the spell-based nodes or even the damage over time nodes at that point. By taking Explosive Trap, when you do get Exsanguinate, because Exsanguinate is kind of rough to play early on without a good amount of cast speed, and kind of on its own it's a little bit rough, but because Explosive Trap is a physical spell, you're able to use that in combination with Exsanguinate as it slowly gets to the point where it's leveled up and it feels a lot better. You're able to use Explosive Trap alongside it to get a pretty smooth leveling process. So the notes are all in here. And again, there's just a couple of kind of yellow notes to really draw your attention to them, and it's been a pretty smooth leveling process. I've been really happy with it, and it plays really smoothly. So go ahead and check that one out. And the final build for the Class Builds for Everyone project is the good old Marauder, and this is going to be an Earthshatter Berserker, the classic. The slam, the big bonks, the war cries, all of it. It's been lovely. I've played it for several leagues now. This was the build that I took the furthest in the one league where I did play hardcore SSF the whole way through. It's just big, it's beefy, and it gets the job done, and it's really cool. So we have again, as always, the leveling trees for it. As you go through, this is another one that's a pretty smooth play style, just because you do get Earthshatter at level 12, and as long as you have some of your kind of Warcry set up fairly early, it can play pretty effectively. And I do want to note, though, because the Marauder doesn't gain access to Splitting Steel naturally, that is by far the smoothest way to level this, at least just for Act 1. So I've put in a couple of notes here where, you can play Ground Slam or Molten Strike if you want, but I really recommend muling a Splitting Steel gem. So I kind of have that technique listed here. And once you're level 12, you just kind of get into the build, and it's just a smooth progression all the way through. So a lot like the Lightning Trapper and a little bit like the Phys dot character. I'd recommend just trying this out. And again, as with all the other builds, give them a try this week as we're building up toward league start. See what you like to play, and I'll be building out the rest of these PoBs as we go. So with that being said, let me kind of give a kind of an outro and what to look for in the future as I continue working on these builds. So there's a few things that I want to leave you with as sort of takeaways from this whole project and where we're going to be moving in the future. The first is that you can follow my progress. There will be a link in the description. I know the PoBs are there, but I have a kind of a Google sheet that I've been updating with some of the tasks that are left to do. Eventually it's going to turn into the change log for all 7 of the guides, so you can kind of see all in one place where the changes have been made. But for now, it has the PoBs. As I work on them throughout this week, the PoBs are updated in that list. It has all the tasks moving forward, and it's a good place to just kind of see as an overall reference for the guide as a whole. So go ahead and check that out in the description. I also want to stress again, I know it'll be obvious if you look at any of the PoBs that aren't the cold.pob, but these are not complete. I'm still working on these. This takes a ton of time to do well, and I'm really committed to doing them well. So there's been a lot of testing that's already gone into the leveling, the itemization, how I wanted to do it, converting the cold.guide over to kind of a template, and getting even the forum guide itself set up as a template to be able to kind of push these out as we finalize things and make decisions. And then I kind of just am able to write this up. As a matter of fact, this was about a month or two ago now, but the Toxic Rain guide, because we built out the PoB kind of on stream, we did some testing and I kind of find out what worked really well. I was able to write the Toxic Rain forum guide in basically one stream. So as I move forward and we do more testing on stream and off stream and work on those will be updated. And as the forum guides get pushed out and all that, I'll be updating the description down below, as well as putting out more videos of this update process. So with that being said, I really hope you're as excited about this as I am. I'm really, really happy with the progress that we've made. I didn't really know what to expect when we got into it, and it's been a ton of work, but it's been a ton of fun. So go ahead, pick out one of those builds if any of them look good to you. I just recommend trying them out a little bit, level them up this weekend, kind of do this week before League launch, kind of do a test run and see how they feel. If you have any questions, the Discord is generally the best place to be. We literally have thousands of people in there that are all prepping for League start. They're all in there to talk PoE. So it's a great place to get questions answered and to connect with other players, particularly about these builds. So with that being said, if you enjoyed the preview of the leveling build and the kind of overall intro and summary of the series, do me a favor, hit the like button. If you want to see more of these as I kind of go through this whole process, toss me a sub. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to 3.18, to kind of building these out, playing them more, and especially if you're going to play in SSF. Go ahead and join me on stream. If you have any questions, I'll be playing through this League start in SSF. I actually haven't picked out my build yet. That's something I'm going to be doing this week. It's a weird feeling to be able to kind of spin my own wheel if I wanted to of my own builds now, but I'll be figuring out what I'm going to League start, and we'll be kind of going through that process together, kind of as a community, the way that we've sort of built these out as a kind of collaborative process. So I hope to see you either on stream or in Discord. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.